today, this afternoon, we're going to have really an amazing lineup of entrepreneurs who tell you in a very personal way, I think, about their adventures and about their successes in quite a different few fields. So I think we're going to be really hear some fantastic stories. I'm going to start, and we're going to start with, I think it's announced in the program as a type of college tour. So I'm going to sit down on stage here with Daniel de Boer. He's the founder of ProQR, and you're going to learn everything about how he gets up in the morning, and no, not that type of detail, but lots of detail about what he does and why, and how he sees the future. Give a very warm welcome to Daniel de Boer. Great, Daniel. Thanks so much for being here. So, you know, you started this a number of years ago, but I really want to actually go back to your very early years. Can you take us through your early years in youth? What you were thinking about, what your dreams were? You went into IT at some stage. Why? Can you give us some insight into what you were like as a youngster?
Sure. Yeah, I did not really have a lot of IT experience or education, but still felt it was a good first step to start a business there and do something good for the world, because we saw that there was a tremendous amount of energy that was wasted in IT, and we felt we could make a difference there with changing the infrastructure. So I was pretty young, starting my first company. That went okay, sold that company. Then started a second company, which...
How old were you then, after you sold it?
22, I think. Yeah. Started a second company that also went okay, sold that one, and the third company did not go so well, that went bankrupt, but yeah, you win some, you lose some. And then the fourth company was a good company, was a big data company, but I stopped that company when my son was born 7 years ago. So my son was born with cystic fibrosis 7 years ago, and when he was born I thought I need to do something for that disease to make sure that he gets a chance on a good life. So I stopped that last company, I sold it, it merged into another company, but way too early to start ProQR Therapeutics.
Yeah. So okay, so what happens? You're a guy, you're relatively young, obviously done for companies. You were probably thinking, okay, as you said, school is not for me. You go into IT, you make good successes, and then you have something quite invasive and tragic actually happening. Well, I mean, tell us a little bit about, I mean, I know I don't want to dwell too much on it, but obviously your son was born with CF. What happened? You had a birth of a baby, which was really good. Tell us a little bit about the sort of more like the shock perhaps you went through, which I could imagine happened.
Yeah, so it was my second child, so it's a devastating thing to experience. It clearly disrupts your entire pink cloud that you're on when your child is born and you're happy at home. And, after a few weeks we heard from the newborn screening that he was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis. So my first reaction was that, yeah, obviously I wanted to know everything about it, I wanted to figure out which therapies were out there, which people specialized on cystic fibrosis in the world. And fairly quickly found out that patients with CF have a very limited life expectancy. It's still about 25, 27 years. So I thought I'm not going to settle with that. So also I thought this is too important to hope that somebody else will pick it up and make sure it happens. So basically the week after my son was born, I decided to come into action and started a foundation to raise some money to invest in research, because I thought, for CF there's only a handful of patients. It's probably not feasible to develop a product for cystic fibrosis patients. So you need to raise money, invest that, and through that way find products. But then after a while I figured out that you could actually, for a disease like cystic fibrosis, eventually when you have a product you could develop a feasible market. So I decided if that's possible, then why not raise money and start a company and do the trick that I did before in IT, build a business around something that I kind of understand, not really, but kind of understand, and take control over it myself. So that's what we did. than a few years later. But obviously the first period is devastating.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So, and then as you said, you know, great, you start with a foundation and you think actually it makes sense to build a company around this and to make that your life's work. Is that what your ambition was at the time? So obviously, you know, your son is at play, you want to actually promise him a better life than what's available for him right now. So tell us a little bit about that ambition that you have. What were you setting out to do, and how did you go about it then with the company?
So I applied a lot of lessons that I learned in my previous company. So in every company, it's all about the people. The product is, you can change the product, you can change whatever you do. It's all about the people that drive success, because in the end, it's a chain of decisions that are made that decide if your company is successful or not. So I learned from my IT experience that having a good mentor around me is something that very much helped me. That really helped me to get to the next level. So in IT, I had a mentor that was one of the founders of TomTom. So I thought, when I want to start a company in biotech, I need someone that was successful in biotech and that can help me to understand this business better. So I found that in two people, and I really invested time in making sure they got to know them, got into their office, and eventually got them to like me enough to become a mentor, which were Dinko Valerio, who started a company here called Crucell, which was acquired by J&J, and the other person was Henry Termeer, the longtime CEO of Genzyme. And yeah, I learned a tremendous amount of things from these two gentlemen. In the early days, but also in further building out the company to where we are now. So I started there, but also started going to all the experts in the world that knew anything about cystic fibrosis. So I spent 2 years traveling around the world to meet everyone, and went to all the cystic fibrosis conferences, went to see all the scientists, all the key opinion leaders, a lot of doctors, and eventually came to the conclusion that everybody in the CF space was kind of trying to do the same thing, which was a small molecule approach to target the defective protein. And then I had also met a few other people that were working on gene therapy or RNA therapeutics, and I figured if you can do those approaches, why is nobody trying that for cystic fibrosis? So we brought a group together that was assessing alternative approaches to target cystic fibrosis, and eventually we found that. We found a technology at Harvard, which was described by an RNA investigator. We licensed the technology, and that's what today we are developing for cystic fibrosis.
Okay, just a few questions, and then I just want to open up. But for me to understand a little bit better, so essentially you did your own course, which is great, but also you found two exceptional people in the Netherlands. I'm sure there are lots of entrepreneurs in the hall today who actually would also like to just find two of the best sort of Dutch sort of VIPs in the field. So, I mean, was it really the fact, probably, do you think it was down to your personality that you were able to actually get them on board so quickly? And as you said a little bit, you won them over, because I think it's quite an achievement. It's really good.
It wasn't easy. It involved a lot of stalking and eventually making my way into their office. And so I talked to Henry's assistant after I had emailed her for like 30 times probably. And she called me up and she said, you know, next week there's a slot that Henry can have a 30-minute call with you. And I said, well, that's great, I'll take the slot. And then right after the call, I emailed her. I said, yeah, I looked at my calendar, but it happens to be that I'm in Boston then, so yeah, I can also come by and meet with Henry. And she said, yeah, okay, well, that's fine. So I booked a ticket, went to Boston. We spent an hour and a half talking, actually, and 6 months later, he was a big fan and investor in the company, and is still a board member.
Amazing, amazing. I'm sure some of you would like to just ask a few questions to Daniel right now. Anyone who's there, can you please stand up, and then a microphone will come to you quite soon. Any questions now? Then we'll just go on. I have quite a few more. You mentioned that actually what you initially did, your 2 years of traveling around, did you set up a type of think tank? Is that what you did to get all the experts on CF together? And was this at the time when the company had started already, or at the foundation level, just so that I have a better...
Well, that kind of transitioned over into the company. So the foundation was more of excuse to be able to get involved with all these people. And then as soon as we saw that there was something real, we decided to start a company. But starting a company and building it out has a lot of different aspects to it. So part of it's the finance, part of it's the science, part of it's the people around it, and all of that needs to come together, and all those stars need to align to come to the next level. So around all those different topics, I had good people around me. On the science, there was an experienced group of translational scientists, of biotech entrepreneurs that helped me to assess certain opportunities and eventually select which opportunity we took forward. And the same we did on the financial side. So I had a good group of financial advisors around me, because this industry is very expensive, and it's very capital intensive with a very high risk profile, which is very different from IT, where the development timelines are typically much shorter, and the market approval is not regulated. So it's so much easier to launch a product in IT than it is here, and that comes with very lengthy timelines, a very high capital intensity, and a very high risk profile for those investments. So it was quite a different game than what I did in IT. So I had some people around me to think that through, and so we really set out a strategy on the science side, where we said we want to do something novel, something that's feasible, something that we can do independently ourselves, and that would really contribute to the space. So not a me too, but something that would be really novel for cystic fibrosis. On the finance side, we did the same. We said the long-term goal for this company is to bring a product for CF patients to patients, and not work to a proof of concept, but really put our dot on the horizon all the way there where the patient reaches the market, where the product reaches the market. And to do so, we also very carefully set out a strategy on how to finance the company. So step by step, we handpicked the investors that joined into the company to make sure that we were completely aligned on what we were doing. So that we were all focused on the long-term objective of the company, which was bringing the product to patients.
Yeah. So give us a little bit of an example. So you cherry pick essentially your investors. So what were the criteria you were looking for to make sure it was well aligned with your objective? And I think we'll talk a little bit more about it, really to get that drug, or a drug that can actually lengthen your son's life, right?
Yeah.
So how did you select those investors?
So I looked for alignment with investors, and that's not difficult in this business, because development timelines are very long, which means that the investor does a commitment for the complete cycle of what you intend to do with the company. If you don't project an exit point before getting a product to market, it makes it very hard for investors to sign up for it, because that period is very long and it's hard to oversee that. Always things take longer and things get more expensive and things happen along the way, so you need to account for that too. So I looked for investors that could help us to, in the short term, finance the operations and make sure that we got the company to the next level, but that would also help us to get to an IPO as soon as possible, because as soon as you can IPO, there's kind of an exit for the shareholders that from that point on are free to stay or go. So the IPO, going public early, was always part of the plan to ensure the independence of the company to eventually independently develop a product to patients.
Yeah, that's quite exceptional, because you founded the company in 2012 and you IPO'd it in 2014, and not just on a minor stock exchange somewhere, but on NASDAQ.
Yeah.
So that sounds like quite an impossible thing for anyone to do. Take us through the story that gets you onto NASDAQ.
Well, also there, it's all about the people. So I have a great team around me. I mean, we run a company with about 150 people. We're here in Leiden. We have an office in Palo Alto. But I obviously have a very strong team around me, of very experienced people that delivered a lot of the different aspects before. So public listings, drug development, getting products all the way to market launches, the whole regulatory pathway. A very experienced team that very much like the board lived through a lot of this, and a lot of failures, some successes, and everybody is bringing their collective experience together to make this happening. So an IPO is actually, it's a very boring process. It's a lot of lawyers, a lot of accountants, and a lot of legal writing, and eventually it's like every pitch to investors, but just a bit more intensive. So you do a so-called roadshow. We talked for weeks and weeks with investors in New York and Boston, San Francisco, and a few other places in the US. And then at the day of your IPO, you basically price the issuance of new shares, and you raise the money.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And so just that I understand it as well, how much did you raise before the IPO?
So we did the IPO in 2 steps. We did a so-called crossover round, which is the last private round before your IPO. That was 60 million. And then we did the IPO, which was 112 million. And before that, we had raised 3.5 million.
That's amazing. So, well, good exit, I'm sure, for your early investors, which I think really pays off taking a risk. That's really great. I just want to check. I'm sure there's some questions. No one who wants to? Yes, please can you get up, and there's a microphone coming towards you.
Could maybe do without.
Well, that way it's there. Fantastic.
Hi, my name is Koen Breedveld. I have a small question. You mentioned that you don't have a background in biotech. How deep do you dive into the science of your company?
So I believe, I would like to believe that I understand it pretty well, but it's all on a very conceptual level. Again, I have great people around me, very experienced scientists. I want to understand on a conceptual level what we're doing and where the risk is, and where the things are that we know for sure, and where the things are that we don't know, and where the things could be that we just don't see. But outside of that, I rely on very good people around me.
Another question.
Paul van der Hoeven, Radboud University Medical Center. ProQR is also working on inherited blindness, so ophthalmology. Can you elaborate on why you're working on that as well?
Absolutely. So when I first started looking around in biotech, I saw quite a few companies that were working on one individual asset. And with one individual asset and a success rate of about 5% of the early assets, and that's no way to build a sustainable company. So from a very early stage, we started diversifying, so building several pillars under the company in several different disease areas, all focused on orphan diseases, on oligonucleotides, so the RNA therapeutics that we're developing, in diseases where we believe that there's a very high unmet medical need, and where we can actually deliver the oligonucleotide to the organ of interest. So for cystic fibrosis, we do it through inhalation. But then a second program that we started in collaboration with Radboud is targeting Leber's congenital amaurosis, which is the most common form of genetic blindness, where we use a very similar technology that we use in cystic fibrosis, but then in the eye. And that program is moving forward well. It's going into clinical studies over the coming few months. So good progress there.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Another question?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Jasper Nijkamp from Radical Surgery. I'm wondering, so you had an obvious reason to start this company, so do you ever have to make decisions which are sort of conflicting between you being the boss of the company and at the same time at home as a father?
So actually I think we're all very lucky to work in this industry, because this is one of the very few industries that I know of where doing something good for the world actually goes hand in hand with building a very successful company. And I think that's what we're doing. Every decision that we make, it's on our business card, it's on the wall in the office, is driven by what is in the interest of patients. So our main rule in the company, if you don't know if you have a hard time making a decision, ask yourself the question, what is in the interest of patients? And typically that's always the right answer. Because at the end of the day, when you are successful for patients, you are successful for your company, your employees, your shareholders. So I think it's actually very aligned.
Then I think in the interest of time as well, whereas I would really hate to stop this conversation, I just want to ask one more question. So you're now having your first product in phase 1 trials, right?
Yeah, phase 2.
Phase 2, wonderful. You know, in the not too distant future, hopefully it can go into phase 3. At what stage do you think your new treatment will reach your son?
Well, that will take a few more years. But yeah, we just had our first clinical data readout in the cystic fibrosis program, which is very encouraging. Data looks very good. So yeah, with this data in hand, we're hopeful, and yeah, it enforces our belief that we can bring this to patients in a very aggressive way. So working in orphan diseases in this highly regulated space, we believe there's room for creative pathways to get products to patients soon. So we're working on in all our programs, also in LCA or in EB, but also in CF, with the regulators to see how what the best and fastest possible way to patients can be. But it will be a few more years.
Yes, that's amazing. And then really finally, you mentioned already, and you quite a few times, how important it is to have the right people around you, have a good team, good advisors, along the whole way of actually from where you started to where you're now. I just wondered, what other piece of advice would you give to the audience today to really make their dreams come true?
I think it's super important to know where you're going. So having your dot on the horizon, knowing very clear what the eventual goal is, what when you look back at all this, where you want to be, your dot on the horizon. To have that very clear, I think that's the most important thing, because your path will not be straight towards that. You will deviate from that. There will be obstacles, there will be hurdles you have to go around. But as long as you know exactly where you're going, you can always stay on course.
Amazing. Well, fantastic. Thank you so much, Daniel and Boer.